A couple, Joe and Chaz, arrive at a secluded holiday cottage in the countryside. As they step inside, Chaz wrinkles his nose at a musty odor, though Joe insists he smells nothing. Chaz grumbles about the caretaker's negligence. She closed the fridge but forgot to unplug it, and now ants are crawling across the counter. While Joe heads off to unpack their suitcase, Chaz begins wiping down the shelf. Chaz grows increasingly frustrated as he realizes the entire house is in disrepair. Joe tries to soothe him, revealing he brought a gift, a copper bangle to symbolize their resilience after 9 years together. As Joe places his pills in the cupboard, Chaz suggests that if he quits his job, they could finally spend more time together. Joe admits that he enjoys working, it keeps him occupied. Chaz, however, laments that they should have done more with their time together. As Chaz cooks, Joe's phone rings. When Joe is nowhere to be found, Chaz glances at the screen. It's a call from Mick. Meanwhile, Joe is in the bathroom, relieving himself, only to notice that his urine is red. Later, over dinner, Chaz casually mentions that he'll need to find a new cleaner, as their current one will be dead soon. This upsets Joe, and Chaz quickly apologizes. However, tensions rise again as they bicker over food rhymes. Frustrated, Joe snaps, accusing Chaz of needing to win every argument and constantly fixating on trivial annoyances. Growing more agitated, Joe tells Chaz he has no idea what real anger is. Chaz fires back, insisting he does. He's furious about the life he's missed out on for the past 9 years. Chaz vents his frustration, saying he gave up everything, including his dreams, to take care of Joe and be there for him. He insists he did it because he wanted to and still does. Looking Joe in the eye, he declares that if Joe thinks pushing him away with constant fights will make him leave, he's mistaken. Joe, visibly shaken, apologizes and retreats to the bedroom. As Chaz clears the table, his gaze lands on Joe's phone. Chaz attempts to unlock Joe's phone, first tracing a C for Chaz, but it doesn't work. He tries again with an M for Mick, and the screen unlocks. The next day, Joe and Chaz sit with their caretaker, Molly, playing Monopoly. As Chaz excuses himself to use the bathroom, Molly turns to Joe and casually mentions that she heard raised voices while out walking the dogs the previous day. Then, with a knowing look, she tells him, anger is the third stage. There are 7 stages of grief: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, reconstruction, and finally acceptance. Molly explains that she went through them all when she lost Fraser. She tells Joe that not everyone experiences them in the same way or at the same time, but he won't be the only one to go through it. In response, Joe shifts the conversation and reminisces about how, in the 90s, he was almost a pop star. Joe listens quietly from a distance as Chaz shares his past. Chaz was in a band, and one of their songs took off, but they were eventually dropped by their label. He attempted a solo career, but it failed, sending him into a deep depression. During that time, he would go on MySpace and post nasty comments on his fans' profiles. He says he went through all the stages of grief except for bargaining, but he finally reached acceptance when he met Joe. Molly, listening intently, suggests that maybe coming here is his way of bargaining. Walking, relaxing, and pretending this vacation is real, pretending that death and Joe's cancer don't exist. Joe arrives and plays a song from Chaz's old band on Alexa, and they dance together, laughing as Molly watches in amusement. Later that night, Joe is in the kitchen preparing dinner when Chaz enters, his face glistening from freshly applied lotion. He reminds Joe of his promise to give him a massage. Just then, Joe's phone beeps. He ignores the notification. Chaz asks Joe about Mick, but before Joe can respond, Chaz confesses something of his own. Years ago, while he was in therapy, he kissed a man. At the time, he and Joe hadn't been intimate for a long while, and he was tempted to go back to the man's place, but he ultimately chose not to. Joe listens before revealing that Mick is actually a woman, one of his Macmillan nurses. The tension between them eases, and they reconcile. Wanting to make it up to Chaz, Joe takes his hand and leads him to the bathroom, where he has prepared a surprise. Joe has prepared a luxurious mud bath for Chaz, who eagerly sinks into the tub while Joe pours him a glass of champagne. Joe discreetly slips something into his drink. As Chaz relaxes, the true nature of the bath is revealed. The mud is actually quick-drying cement. Some time later, Chaz wakes up groggy and disoriented. Joe calmly explains that he spiked his drink with Xanax. As Chaz tries to move, he realizes he's completely trapped. Joe reveals the truth. Mick, whose full name is Michaela, isn't just his nurse. She's a finance manager and soon to be his wife. Joe reveals that he and Mick are getting married next year. During the week, he lives in London with her, only coming to see Chaz on weekends under the pretense of visiting his elderly father. He confesses that he deliberately wasted the past 9 years of Chaz's life, admitting that he isn't even dying, he only pretended to be. As Chaz struggles to process the betrayal, Joe takes out a photograph of his daughter, Olivia. She was 13 and a big fan of Atlantic 5, Chaz's band. Inspired by him, she began writing songs and idolized him, until he left a cruel message on her MySpace profile: "You are so full of shit, why don't you go kill yourself?" She took it to heart and tried. She remained in a coma for 9 years. Joe and his wife separated because they couldn't take it anymore and made the painful decision to pull the plug. She never left a note, but Joe did his research and found Chaz. Joe opens the window and describes an ancient execution method called scaphism. The victim was covered in honey and milk to attract insects, which would then draw rats, leading to a slow and agonizing death. Panicked, Chaz calls for Molly, but Joe calmly informs him that he fired her, just as Chaz had wanted. Joe then leaves the bathroom and sits down to enjoy his dinner. The episode ends with Chaz, trapped and helpless, screaming for him while insects begin swarming into the room. Like and subscribe the channel for more videos like these.